Hey, welcome to Puget Sound Garden Life. I'm Allison, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to plan and prepare for your fall garden. It's crazy to think that it's already time to prepare our fall gardens because yesterday was the hottest day that we've had in the Seattle area this entire year. At the airport, it got up to 94 degrees, and this is the first time in 371 days that the Seattle area has had a temperature above 90 degrees. So it's been pretty hot and I'm loving it, but it's also time to get planning for my fall garden. Today I'm going to talk to you about what vegetables are good for a fall and winter harvest, how to find your first average frost date, which is really important for preparing your fall garden, and I'm going to talk about how to create a garden calendar so that you can make sure your crops get into the ground and bear fruit or bear vegetable before that first frost sets in. Before I jump into those topics, I want to talk to you about my garden journal. So I think that having a garden journal is a really helpful tool to making sure that you can learn the most out of each thing you plant in your garden. I keep a paper garden journal, and I also keep a digital garden journal in an Excel workbook. I want to show you my paper journal because I really just love this for the ease of writing things down on the fly. I keep track of things like when I plant seeds, what varieties I plant, when I transplant them outside, things I do like fertilizing and other things like that, as well as when I start harvesting my food. So take a look at this garden journal. I really love it because it has those grid lines. I like the grid lines compared to just traditional straight ruled lines because it allows me to do things like draw diagrams for things that we're going to be building or draw maps, and it's really helpful compared to just a straight ruled line. So I picked this up off of Amazon. I really love this journal. It's got really thick paper and is great for bringing down into the garden and not having to worry about getting my computer dirty if I'm keeping a digital version as well. First thing I'm going to do is talk about what vegetables are good for a fall or winter harvest, and then you can start thinking about what vegetables do you and your family really enjoy that are well suited to harvesting in the fall and the winter. I want to start off by saying that there are a lot of other vegetables that are not on this list. This list is just the things that myself and my family like to eat and that are pretty common and popular vegetables for first-time gardeners that are getting into fall gardening for the first time. I'm going to talk about 3 categories of crops today. I'm going to talk about frost intolerant crops. Those are ones that the plant will die back when it's experienced its first frost. But these are short season crops that will allow you to harvest those before that first frost sets. The next category is a light frost tolerant. That's from 28 to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I'm going to talk about plants that can tolerate a hard frost, which would be below 28 degrees Fahrenheit. So my list here for frost intolerant crops is pretty small. I've got bush beans and cucumbers. Now, some varieties of cucumbers are going to take longer than you have in time. But if you look and find a variety that's about 55 days to maturity or something like that, then you'll still have enough time to keep harvesting cucumbers from those plants before the frost sets in. Bush beans are awesome because they are compact and pretty short season, and you can just tuck them into little spots where you have open spaces, so you don't necessarily need a whole block or a section to plant those bush beans. If you have a square foot here, a square foot there, you can pop some bush beans in those areas. For plants that can tolerate a light frost, I've got peas, cauliflower, bok choy, and lettuces. Not all varieties of lettuces can tolerate a light frost. I'm going to be planting romaine lettuce this fall because that's one of our favorites and does well. In the hard frost category, a lot of these vegetables even get sweeter and taste better after they have experienced a frost. So here we've got broccoli, kohlrabi, kale, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, radish, arugula, beets, carrots, turnips, garlic,
leeks, and onions. And now remember, this list is just what I like to grow, what my family likes to eat, and what's pretty popular for new and beginning gardeners.
What we're going to talk about next is how to find your average first frost date. This is important because, as I just showed you, some vegetables are not frost tolerant and the plants will die back. A lot of my long season vegetable crops, like my tomatoes, my peppers, my tomatillos, my basil, basil's not necessarily long season, but they are crops that will not tolerate a frost. And once those frosts hit, then those plants will start to die back and the fruit and vegetables on those will start to change in texture, and we want to make sure we get those harvested. So planning for your first average frost is super easy. All you have to do is hop on Google, and in the search bar you can type in first average frost and then your zip code. So for me, I have settled with a first average frost date of November 1st, and that's here in zone 8B in the Seattle area. Now, the first average frost date can actually in my area range from November 1st to November about 11th, but I settled with that earlier date just to make sure that I had things in the ground early enough to come to maturity so I could harvest those. Also, as we get closer to that frost date, the days get shorter. The amount of sun that you have is less and less every day. So things are going to take a bit longer to come to maturity than they say on the seed packets, as compared to the spring where your days are getting longer and longer. So once you've jumped online and you've Googled your first average frost date, you're going to come up with a lot of search options. A great one that I like to use is called Plant Map, but there's lots of others. So look at a few different sites and try to get a good idea of what your first average frost date is. I'm going to give you a look at how I plan my calendar in my journal, and that's going to show you how you can backwards plan from your first frost date to when you need to start sowing those seeds, which is probably right now.
Here's a look at my specific fall garden planting calendar. The first thing I did was identify my first frost date of November 1st, and I'm going to call that week 0. And then I counted back how many weeks do I have from that date until now. So I've got 13 weeks ahead of me to grow things before that first frost. On my calendar, I also have the weeks of the year, and that's because I keep an annual gardening calendar, which I'll show you in a minute, that keeps track of every week of the year and what I have been doing during those times. Next to the weeks until the first frost, I've got the date, and then I have some space here so that I can plan what I should be doing during those days, during those weeks to get ready for my planting. The first thing that I really want to prepare for is seeding my broccoli, cauliflower, and kohlrabi. And I'm going to seed those indoors because they are pretty sensitive to the heat and drying out, and I'll be able to take care of them a lot easier inside. I've actually already started seeding my broccoli and kohlrabi a little over a week ago. So my family really likes broccoli, cauliflower, and kohlrabi, and I've decided to call that my little brassica trio. And instead of planting a whole 6-pack of each of those at a time, I create a 6-pack that has 2 broccoli, 2 flower, and 2 kohlrabi. Let me give you a look. Right here, this is what I mean by a 6-pack. These trays are trays that I've reused many times, and they're a good size for growing vegetables. So here I've got 2 broccoli, 2 kohlrabi, and 2 cauliflower. These were seeded on June 21st, and then on June 26th, I repeated that same sowing so that I can succession plant these crops. That way, my broccoli aren't all coming to harvest at the same time. I can have them throughout the fall and winter to eat. So that's what I'll be doing for those 3 specific crops because we really like those a lot. So if you're planning on growing broccoli, cauliflower, and kohlrabi in the fall, you want to make sure you get those seeded about 12 weeks before your first average frost date. If it is already less than 12 weeks before your first average frost date, you can pick up starts at the garden center. even though I'm not going to be planting my broccoli, cauliflower, and kohlrabi, transplanting them into the garden until 8 weeks before the first frost, I am getting them prepared now so that when I set them out, they're going to be stronger plants and they're not going to need as much tender care with watering. Also, I don't even have any space in my garden yet for those. So I don't have anywhere to put them. So growing them inside will let me get them sized up. And then when I'm harvesting my longer season summer crops, right after I pull those things out, like my bush beans, my tomatillos, my Brussels sprouts, things like that, I'll be able to immediately put in a larger size plant instead of just the seed. So if it's already too late for you to plant broccoli, cauliflower, kohlrabi by seed, make sure you get to your local nursery or garden center quick so that you can get some of those plants as starts. I know that in our area and all across the US, we have had a huge shortage of seeds and vegetable starts because gardening has gotten super popular during the COVID crisis. So make sure that even though it's not time to plant your broccoli outdoors yet, go find some and take care of it either in your window or set it out on your deck or set it someplace where you can keep it watered and take care of it on a regular basis. Next thing I'm thinking about is 12 weeks before the first frost, I'm going to be seeding some peas. I'm actually going to do those indoors for the same reason as the broccoli with spacing. And then I'm going to seed some carrots outside. I already have that space ready and waiting to go. 10 weeks before my first frost, I'm going to seed my romaine lettuce. I'm going to do that indoors, again, because they're so tender and because I don't have the space yet. Notice that I'm also seeding more carrots 10 weeks before the first frost, 8 weeks before the first frost, and that's again succession seeding so that all my carrots are not ready at the same time. 9 weeks before my first frost, I'm going to seed my beets, and I'll also be doing some succession seeding of those. 8 weeks before that first frost, I'm going to transplant those broccoli, cauliflower, and kohlrabi outside into my garden. And then in September, I'm so excited, I'm going to start seeding my radishes and of course more beets and carrots. Before September, it's still too hot to seed radishes and they will bolt. So those you want to wait so that they can have some weather that's less than 70 degrees to be most successful. So your planting calendar is going to look different depending on where you live, what vegetables you like to eat, whether you're planting from seed or planting from start. I just wanted to show you the process that I go through to make my planting calendar so that you can make a planting calendar specific for your garden. Like I said earlier, I also keep an annual garden calendar, and this is a garden calendar that has all 52 weeks of the year, and I keep track of everything throughout the year so I know what worked well for timing, because I'm trying to maximize the amount of crops that I can grow in my small space. So when things are finished and mature, I want to have crops ready to put in the ground as soon as I take those old crops out. If you're interested in more talk about an annual calendar, I would love to do a video focused on that. Just give me a comment below letting me know that's something you'd like to see. If you're finding this video useful right now, I'd love it if you could give a thumbs up or subscribe if you have not yet already.
If you're excited to start planning your own fall planting calendar, then I recommend that you take a look at a website called garden.org. On that website at the top, there are different drop-down menus you can choose. Choose the Tools and Apps drop-down, and from there is a vegetable planning calendar. You can put in your zip code, and it's going to give you a calendar for a ton of different crops. It's going to tell you for your zip code when you should be seeding indoors or direct sowing outdoors, pretty much any vegetable you can think of, and it is a really helpful tool to use along with creating your own vegetable planting calendar. I hope that you found some value out of this video. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button. If you have any questions or would like me to give you any advice about planting a fall and winter garden in your area, leave a comment below. If you're interested in how I plan my whole year's worth of garden and would want to know more about my annual planting calendar, let me know in the comments and I would love to make a future video about that. Thanks so much for watching this video, and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you'd like to see more.